The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome to ARC's fifth annual Fraud Month webinar series. We want to welcome today Walter Opai of Perseus. Today he will be talking about, so next slide. So credit card fraud prevention in the ARC risk check powered by Perseus. Before we start with Walter, just want to say hi. My name is Doug Nass. I'm the Director of Fraud Investigations at ARC. Been here for doing that for the last 27 years. And my colleague, Cornelius Hadding.
Yep, thank you, Doug. Cornelius Hadding, Director of Revenue Integrity, been with ARC for coming up to 6 years, been with IATA prior to that, and worked across the globe in many iterations. But yeah, over to Walter.
Yeah, one housekeeping item. We do enjoy getting questions from the audience, and you can send them in along the right-hand side under the questions area. Click on that and write your question in, and we will answer as many as we can. So off to Walter.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks, Cornelius, and thanks everyone for joining and participating in today's webinar about credit card fraud, also explaining a little bit about our company, Perseus, as well our partnership where we developed the ARC risk check powered by Perseus, supporting the merchant travel ecosystem to fight confirmed credit card fraud, costs associated to credit card fraud, and power basically understand also legitimate customers booking at your website or different channels. Basically, my name is Wouter. Well, working for the company Perseus, obviously now for 4.5 years, located in Amsterdam, and I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about our company and our partnership together with ARC. So basically, before I start, let's tell a little bit more about the company Perseus. Basically, we were founded basically from an initiative of a group of airlines. So we had a data sharing exchange platform, and basically the idea was to share confirmed fraud amongst a group of merchants, a group of airlines, and therefore better understand if fraudsters were attacking the airlines rather than fighting and identifying confirmed fraudsters as a single individual merchant. So basically, fraudsters are also cooperating, finding out how to basically attack all the merchants, and therefore Perseus was founded to become the community's own response to the problem of fraud. Basically grew out of the need to share both intelligence, but also better cooperate in a group as a community to identify and fight fraud. Well, basically, over 13 years now, we grew from a founding group of airlines into one of the leading platforms for sharing fraud intelligence. And we're now serving both the larger airline customers, online travel agents, basically a longer list of travel merchants that cooperate on our platform, contribute with their data to our platform, and therefore are in a position to better identify fraudsters, well, basically to identify fraudsters that try to attack merchants. Basically, let me share a little bit about our company, some of the numbers. So we serve merchants across the globe. So in all regions, we have merchants that contribute to our platform, upload confirmed fraud information into our Perseus database. And some of the key figures that I have available is that around 29+ million negative data elements are uploaded into our fraud database. But also, since many of the airlines check automatically all their transactions against our platform, we do see a lot of positive data elements too. So not only we are in a position to identify or basically tell if we think that a transaction is associated to confirmed fraud, we also understand how many times we have seen familiar data fields, data points being checked against our database versus the ratio of confirmed fraud being provided to us. So we also help you to understand, do we think there's a legitimate customer basically booking at your website or via any other channels? So on an annual basis, we process 200+ million transactions, and around 10,000+ new fraud uploads are being done by our community members on a weekly basis. So basically, we have several options how to use our tool, and I will obviously show you a little bit more about our product that we developed together with ARC to help the merchants that are willing to that find it in their best interest to identify fraudsters, check and prevent associated fraud costs. But what we also do is we have connections with the larger PSPs, several API partners, which you can connect to in conjunction to us. And in the industry, we also work with a lot of partners, both industry partners, obviously like ARC, but also with companies like IATA, UATP, airline information. And we also work very closely with law enforcement partners, as you can see below. So before we explain how to use our tool to identify transactions that are associated to confirmed fraudsters, maybe let's start explain a little bit about the concept of data sharing and why this is key. But moreover, how does it work? So basically in the slide that I'm sharing with you now is the concept of data sharing. Basically, several companies are using our platform to check all their transactions against. And what you can see is that when a certain company, let's say company A, checks all their transactions against our database, but what they also do is they provide and contribute after they have a list of confirmed fraud information, they basically share it into our database, which consequently means that other companies, in this event company B, is executing the same checks against our database, but because of the contribution of company A, providing us with confirmed fraud records, company B is in a position to more easily identify if a certain transaction is associated to fraud. So as we say, company B receives fraud alerts due to the contribution of industry partners, as well as artificial intelligence that is being trained to identify associated fraud to transactions, and therefore easily rejects the transactions and saves fraud costs basically associated to the transactions that are being done on your sales channels. So maybe this is also a good moment, Doc or Cornelius, to contribute, because we not only work with the fraud being provided by our community members, but there is also a contribution of all the data that ARC has at its disposal.
Yeah,
maybe there's something you can explain some more there.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, for travel agencies who might be on this call, we do send out fraud alerts. If you are receiving fraud alerts from ARC, that data that we identify in our systems, both from the email address, phone number, any other relevant information that we can identify as being a fraudulent transaction, and you are to receive that alert, that information is uploaded weekly to the Perseus site as well. So, by using the Perseus tool, by contributing to that tool, you as a travel agency benefit from that, and sometimes you could benefit from it more through using the tool than just relying on an ARC fraud alert, because you'd be getting that data first and you get that data sooner if it's in the system, obviously. But that's one way that we provide our data back to Perseus to help agencies and airlines in the US market.
Great. And if I may ask, do you have also examples or experiences of travel agents you're in contact with that actually experienced that because other people basically uploaded or shared fraud records into the database or with ARC, and therefore other companies basically were in a position to decrease or identify a fraudster coming to their website or any other sales channels.
Absolutely. And Doug can expand a little bit more on this in a minute, but you know, we, as part of the alerts, unfortunately, someone in the value chain has already been hit by that fraudster, and then that data gets to be made known to us. We then, you know, share it and we use it internally. In addition, we have another way for people to report fraud, and they report it to us via stopfraud@arccorp.com. And of course, we do validation on that notification that we get from, you know, an agency or even an airline that might have been a victim of fraud. And as such, once we've done that validation, that information that's been shared with us, similar concept to what is happening within the ARC risk tool, except, you know, it's a slower environment, but the concept's the same because the information is being shared. Someone's been hit by fraud. We then absorb that information into our data sets. We look for it on a daily basis, and if it gets flagged up again, we will notify it. And in addition, we automatically load that data back into the system for other parties to benefit from. Doug, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'd like to add, there's certain fraudsters or repeat travelers that we try to keep tabs on a daily basis. And it's really interesting. A few years ago, I was chasing a fraudster operating out of Lima, Peru. Eventually, I was able to actually talk to him. And I was initially posing as a travel agent. But eventually I told him, I said, you know, I know what you're up to. He had caused at least $600,000 in fraud losses in the U.S. But he formerly lived in the U.S. But since my conversation with him, he nor his passengers have ever returned to the ARC system. But through searching in the Perseus world, he's still committing travel fraud. It's just not in the ARC world. So it really shows, you know, to keep tabs on some of these guys, that they don't stop the fraud, they just shift the fraud to another geographical area.
Yes, indeed, and that's also one of the reasons, obviously, that not data sharing in a specific region, but across the globe, obviously, is a good manner to prevent associated fraud costs. Because obviously you as a merchant might be in the States, might be anywhere else in the world, but fraudsters can obviously use data elements that are associated to different parts of the world, being smart in the way they use IP addresses, but obviously also use different email addresses with different domains, and all data fields they can basically try and use in different ways. So yeah, well, thanks for sharing some of the examples and the experiences as you did just yet, Cornelius. And so as explained, so what we do, the beginning of the concept of data sharing is obviously the merchants contributing by also sending their confirmed fraud records to Perseus, to the database. And what do I mean with sharing fraud records? Well, the most known ones are the names, are the email addresses, phone numbers, IP addresses, basically all key data fields that are used to make any bookings. And what we do is we not only use obviously the data fields being sent to us, but as the fraudsters are becoming smarter, we also need to be more smarter, not only in better cooperation, but also the systems that we apply in identifying fraudsters. How do we do that? Well, we do apply artificial intelligence. So high level, what does it mean? We calculate the risk level of any check. We use therefore obviously the confirmed fraud data, but also transactional data, time-based data. We have several additional data sources that we use to enrich our systems, our data. And basically it's a combination of all data elements that allow us to provide you back with certain scoring, which I will show to you in a minute during the demo, to better understand if you can trust a specific transaction. So basically, by being there, well, what I always say is demo is better than using 1,000 words about how it works. So basically, as a travel agent, as an airline, as an online tour operator, or online travel agent, you would like to have a toolkit that helps you to prevent associated fraud costs, or have different basically goals like optimizing your conversion rates. And the best way to show you is, well, what is the tool that we can offer to you to basically work on this in your daily operations. So let me share my screen and give you a little bit more insights in what the tool actually can do and how it can contribute to your daily operations. So what I'm showing to you right now is our demo environment of the ARC risk check. And basically it allows you and your colleagues to access the platform and allows you to do several checks in a manual way to understand if the transaction is associated to fraud. As explained before, we have different ways of how you can work with the data that we have at our disposal. The ARC risk check is a manner to do manual checks, maybe in the event that you mainly want to check suspicious transactions, but when you have larger volumes, it also allows you to connect to our database, to our systems via a direct API, or directly via your back office systems, or via the API partners that I showed to you earlier. So, well, basically it's a quite easy to understand tool. So basically we have the navigation bar on the left, where it allows you to do the risk checks, report chargebacks, contact experts, but also work on some settings, and it provides you information about your subscription. But let's start from the beginning. So basically, when you would like to understand a certain transaction and the data fields that are associated, we basically welcome you to fill out the data fields. Usually what we always say is the name and the phone are required in order to do a good quality check, but the more data elements you fill out in our system basically grows the chances that we can provide better scoring and better quality of alerts back to you as a merchant. So let's say you have a transaction, and I'm using an example here, which is John Lowe, with a phone number that you have at your disposal that came in because you have all the information available after receiving any transactions. You are able to fill out the information, which I'm doing at the moment, obviously. And again, the more information you add into the system, the better the returns will be. So after filling out information, what I will be doing now is the name, the phone, the email address. You can easily check your transaction. And what will the tool do? We basically check the transactions against our database, and we give back a scoring. And the first example that I'm showing you right now is an example where we have a -99 score, where -99 is the highest score that we have in terms of associated confirmed fraud risk. What we do is we explain in this overview why we score like we showed to you in the portal. So as you can see in this event, the transaction is very high risk and most likely a fraudulent transaction. This score is based on reported fraud cases in our community provided by community members. So what we always do, the score is always an advice. It still allows you obviously to accept transactions, but it's an advice whether or not to accept specific transactions. And in this event, our advice would be to offer an alternative payment method without fraud risk, or simply cancel the transaction. And again, why this scoring? So basically what we do is we have a sum of the phone number, of the email address, and of the name. And what we can see is, and how we calculate is, so let's take the example of, well, more interestingly, maybe the email address. So basically what we do is we make a calculation of the number of times this specific data field was added into our fraud database as confirmed fraud. As you can see, 43 times. But we also tell some more information about the number of checks being done associated to this data field, which results in a final score of -35 in this event. We always provide information about when was the last time that anyone checked this information against our database, explains a little bit more about what type of email domain was used, and basically all information that you need to have the transparency and understand why we calculate the scores as such. And as you can see, obviously, we not only do this for the email address, but we also do it for the phone number and the name in this event, which displays the same type of information.
And
so
Wouter, I just want to add.
Yes, of course.
Wouter, I want to interject here. You know, so one question we normally get is that there's no way do we load credit card data, and we do not use credit card data in this environment. You know, you can do your CVV test, you can look up that card, and there's other explanations as to why and reasons which you can address in a minute as to why the card data is not being used here. But if you look at this and, you know, you couple it with all the other checks and balances that an agency should do before they accept the payment, this took something less than a minute to do this check and review, and then have that additional due diligence behind you or in your to help you with your decision making in this environment. Now, also stepping back a little bit to the origination of this tool, and the reason why we brought this forward is because we wanted to present something for our small to mid-sized travel agencies, and hence the manual environment, right? So you know, so for people on the call, you know, yes, we're going through the manual option here right now because of the cost of entry. There's the cost associated with this tool is so low that by avoiding a single chargeback, which then turns into a debit memo, it has paid for itself. You know, we've done calculations on the impact of a fraudulent transaction that then goes into a chargeback on the airline merchant, the airline then raising a debit memo, and it goes all the way through that chain, and at the end of the day, the agency is still held liable for that. You know, so the cost and ROI rather is something unique here for this manual tool. Of course, Wouter mentioned is the API is also available for larger transactions, or you know, for more frequent or larger volumes of transactions. But Wouter, if you don't mind just touching again on why credit card data is not included.
Yeah, so let's first touch on your other topic. So why did we indeed develop the tool as such and in a manual way? Indeed, what we basically found is, and we did it ourselves too, is mainly serving the larger airlines, the larger travel merchants, which usually is also associated to a significant cost to do the checks, but there was not such a tool available in the industry that also serves small and mid-sized travel agents that most likely want to do also significantly less checks, obviously, compared to the larger travel agents. And that's basically why we partnered with ARC and created the ARC Risk Check to also give an option to the smaller and the mid-sized travel agents to do just a number of checks instead of paying large amounts and doing thousands and thousands of checks every month to pay a minimum amount. That being said, why no credit card information? That's a fair question, obviously, because we're explaining about credit card fraud. So basically, I can explain the following. So what we see is that usually what fraudsters do is they use the data elements that you can see here on the left-hand side way more frequently to commit fraud. And again, they not only use the same data fields, the same data elements, and the same content, but they are smart in the way how they try to change the data elements they used before. For instance, using the same name of the email, but then using a different domain name. But what we also see is that imagine that you as a consumer are being frauded. You will see on your bank app, obviously, that there is something being charged that you did not buy as a consumer. You did not do the payment. You obviously will contact your bank, and in the event it is fraud, it's a very normal situation that you will obviously cancel your credit card and therefore also request a new credit card. And basically, as this happens, the information of providing the credit card information in our tool back to the merchants becomes less relevant, because fraudsters know the methods, they know the way and the mechanisms how fraud works, and they understand that credit cards are being passed, blocked, and never ever used again. And therefore, the added value of showing also the credit card information in the tool is way less impactful than the data elements that I'm showing here on the page. Does that tell basically, or does it explain what you wanted to hear here, Cornelius?
Yes, thank you, Wouter.
Great. All right.
Wouter,
Yeah,
whilst we're on this topic, there's a question that just came in. Is this something we get from ARC or direct from Perseus? I can answer that. The tool itself is powered by Perseus. However, you can request access to the tool by going to ARC, the ARC website, which is arccorp.com, and you could find the link to ARC Risk Check from there. I can share out via chat here or via the questioning. I can share out that link with everybody in a minute. So yes, you can find it via ARC, and it's powered by Perseuss. And I will share the link shortly.
Great. And feel free
I'd like to add,
ask any questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Wouter, the power of putting in the point of departure and the point of arrival is really helpful as well. When I review the data, sometimes you have passengers that have relatively common names, so it's not going to be easy. We know that fraudsters have access to so many compromised credit cards and email addresses that the email might change, the telephone might change, but if you have a passenger that is coming out of maybe a smaller airport, a smaller city, and it matches up, and someone has already uploaded the data into Perseus, and now your customer is coming to you with the same relatively common name, but the same airport codes. That could also be a nice clue that, hey, I need to be careful with this one. When all the other data elements change, just the itinerary alone could be a big clue to maybe back off from accepting the transaction.
Correct. And maybe to add to that, so we not only have the explanation about well, how many times a certain data field is added and how many times it's being checked. You also have the ability to investigate a little bit more on certain data fields on the internet. Obviously, an explanation on why and how we score on a certain data field, but moreover, providing more information, getting back scores associated to your transactions might still make you being in doubt whether or not to accept the transaction. So you also have the option, and always have the option, to basically ask the fraud teams of ARC to basically request additional help. So we have always the option to allow you to fill out more information and contact experts so they can basically help you and get back to you. Yeah, that's quite relevant. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks, Wouter, and thanks, Doug. We just have another question in about, do users have any way of determining who reported the data as fraud? So is it possible to see, let's say ARC has loaded up the data, can you see that it was ARC who loaded the negative data into the system? I don't think that's possible, right?
No, that's not visible here in the ARC risk check. No.
Yeah.
But in the end, like so what we do is obviously when anyone, any merchant, any contributor of providing fraud data into our platform wants to cooperate and share fraud records, obviously we have checks and balances in our system to make sure that the right people upload the right data. And basically in terms of that, it doesn't really matter if you do the right checks and balances, where and what is the source of anyone contributing. If you know it's a genuine person, someone that wants to contribute to fighting fraud, it doesn't really matter where the data is coming from. But unfortunately, we do not per se show if the fraud records are uploaded by ARC or any of the other merchants. In the Perseus tool, which is also built for the larger volumes, we allow customers to also do more sophisticated checks. And there you will also find information about, for instance, what airlines did provide these specific data fields that are associated to confirmed credit card fraud into the system. And it even allows you to contact the specific airline users to ask about their experience with specific transactions.
Thank you, Wouter. Yeah, and then we have some additional questions. A lot of it's around what is the cost associated with ARC Risk Check. So I can answer to that right now. I've actually got the data up in front of me, but I just want to add here that, you know, for if after this session you want to sign up for ARC Risk Check, you'll get a month free access, so you can test the system, see if it's adding value to your environment or not. So there's a free trial available to everybody who's participating here today. So if you feel like you want to sign up, I did share the link out in the questions section. Everybody should have received that, so you can go there and just reach out to us via that link. Alternatively, we'll also can send an email after the webinar session to all the participants with a link to the ARC site where you can find us. On the pricing scales, there are 3 different scales prior to entering into an API environment. So there's a standard, a plus, and a premium. The monthly fees is $29.99 for the month, and for that you get 30 checks per month, and that's only for 1 user. Now, if you need additional users, there's the plus plan, which is $60, $59.99 per month. You get 120 checks, and there's 2 users assigned to that account. In the premium environment, it's $100 for 300 checks a month, and there's 5 users that will get access to the tool. And then, of course, if your transactions are anything beyond the 300 plus range, then an API is best suited for that environment. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it's relatively affordable, considering the potential cost associated with a chargeback. You know, so it sort of pays for itself after 1 incident. And you know, it's I think by having a month to play around with it without any obligations is obviously a benefit as well. So, you know, take us up on that, and then we can go from there. But yeah, that's it. And you want to add anything to that, Wouter?
No, I think let's if possible, let's park it for a minute. I will basically show a little bit more about the demo, another page, and I think we do have another slide that maybe allows you to explain a little bit more with some key figures we have, what could potentially be the associated cost to a fraudster attacking you as a merchant, which basically puts the pricing a little bit more in perspective, that paying a little bit proactively can basically save you way more after the event that you're actually attacked, if that makes sense.
So just on this, I've got a question in based on the score, Wouter. Is there, if we do get a fraudster, what is our obligation once we see the 99% obligation? So, well, it's a commercial decision, right? It comes down to the agency's risk appetite and this ultimately comes back down to the agency or the airline to make a decision.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So obviously you as a merchant, as a travel agent, should basically consider yourself what's the risk appetite you take. The scoring that we provide is based on confirmed fraud data, provides an advice whether to accept or decline a certain transaction. But if we take an example of a larger airline that connects to us via API, what they might do is, let's say, everything that's higher than minus 75, so minus 75 until minus 99, their risk appetite tells us to automatically decline the transaction for instance, the range of minus 75 until minus 50. The certain company will always decide to do a manual check before they make a decision, and everything that's between minus 50 and let's say more positive, automatically transactions are accepted. So it's also the risk appetite indeed of a specific merchant. It's an advice that we provide, but we do have the data to make well-informed, data-driven decisions. And I hope that answers the question. And obviously, we can always help with well, how to determine risk or not, and the appetite you should take.
Yep. And I think the fact that there's a recommendation section on what to do is either ask for an additional payment, a form of payment, so you don't have the risk of the chargeback is an option, right? So you don't have to necessarily decline the transaction because it's a 99%. You can just say, okay, well, can you pay me cash? Can you pay me in another way? And soon, if it is a fraudster, they'll go no, and you'll lose them anyway. But at least that gives you that 100% validation if they decide not to provide an alternative form of payment, or you just decline the transaction. But ultimately, the decision, the information is provided for you to make an informed decision. The decision ultimately still remains with you as the agency, and the associated risk in making that decision is also still in the responsibility of the agency or airline.
Correct. Do you want me to proceed here, Cornelius?
Yes, I think let's go ahead.
All right. So, well, basically, we did a first check, allowing you to check on certain data elements. And the example that I just showed to you is when we provide an advice to decline or decline a transaction or find another payment method. But one of the other reasons allowing you to use the tool is also to basically improve. Oh, that's my bad. That's the wrong field to enter. To also to boost conversion. So in some events, what travel agents, travel merchants do is, well, they would like to better understand if they're dealing with a genuine customer, to more frequently accept specific transactions rather than decline them because simply the booking looks suspicious. So as explained, because we have many of the larger companies checking all their transaction against our database via API, but also doing a lot of companies do manual checks against our database. It also allows us to give back information in the event that we think a transaction is trustworthy. So when you're dealing with a genuine customer, and basically how do we do that? So here we basically provide the same type of information, and what we explain here is that the email address was not reported as fraud, even though there were more than 12 checks being done against our database. So the ratio really explains that many times a transaction or a data field has been checked against our database. However, no confirmed fraud was being added to the database. So it really provides you also some more information and provides you with the confidence to accept certain transactions that might look different, strange, weird in your eyes as the person that is about to accept transactions. So it's not only a tool that helps you to identify and receive an advice on if a transaction can be associated to fraud cost, but it also helps you to give you more confidence in accepting specific transactions. So those are the examples I wanted to show you in the tool today. So again, it allows you to check the details. It allows you to contact experts in case you would like to have this extra confidence too. But we also ask you, in the event there is a confirmed fraud case, to basically report the chargeback into our system. So again, that the community can benefit from the data sharing, the cooperation amongst merchants. Again, information about setting subscriptions, a documentation page explaining you a little bit more how all how the dashboards work in the event that you would like to use the service, but your colleague was not attending this session. We will have the option to also provide you with a documentation page explaining you more about how the tool actually works. So allow me to go back to the slide deck and probably go back to the question that is associated to the pricing of the ARC risk check. I would like to give the word back to you in a bit, but first let's show this slide. This is basically a slide that we added because it was done based on research of ARC, but maybe Cornelius, this allows you to explain a little bit better why it's good to invest in such a tool, a relatively small amount, but how it can proactively save you money on the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, of course, things fluctuate, so these numbers are fluctuating all the time. But there's some constant numbers. I mean, like a commission or fees earned when a travel agency is making a booking. We've averaged that out at about $35 per ticket per booking. Of course, that goes up and down as well, depending on your clientele, etc. But if you look at the average ticket cost, you know, let's say we're working off $700. If that $700 does go into the airline's merchant, and it's a fraudulent card, and the original owner of the card does a chargeback, that money is going to come, that chargeback is going to come back to you as the travel agency, as in a form of a debit memo. So you are, by default, you're going to be responsible, liable for that amount, $703. Not only are you losing that ticket value, but you're also losing the marketing that you had to do to get that customer in the door, any promotions that you might have had, etc., etc. So you're losing that effort, plus you're losing on the cost of having a team member or a staff member having to make that sale, spending time and selling that ticket to a fraudulent traveler. So clearly, for paying, let's say you do the basic plan of $30, and you get one of these debit memos from the agent, from the airlines, ideally you would have paid for that tool for the month, just by avoiding a single chargeback. So further to our calculation, or rather further to our analysis, you know, in order to then recover from that single chargeback, your effort increases, and then just to recover from that loss of one ticket or chargeback rate, we're looking at the possibility of you having to sell 29 new tickets at a similar value just to recover from that chargeback rate. So that's sort of high level how we got to these numbers and sort of what the impact is on an agency when there is a chargeback, and you know, all the downstream costs and hidden fees and everything else that comes with it. So you know, again, you know, spending $30 avoiding a single chargeback could be quite advantageous. That's all from me, Wouter. Yeah. But I do see we have a question that we need to validate on. We touched on this a little bit earlier on what is the responsibility of the agency if a fraudster has been identified by the system, and the score is at 99%. Does the agency have any obligation or responsibility to report that to law enforcement in any way or form, or is there a process in the back end with Perseus that then reports this out?
Well, basically what we do, so we are in contact with law enforcement, and what we do is on a regular basis, we cooperate with law enforcement. If they ask information about certain fraudsters, we obviously not directly give the information, but with valid reasons, we share knowledge to make more impact and actually catch fraudsters in real. But in the tool, there is no direct way to connect to law enforcement. I don't know if on the ARC side, by contacting experts, there's a way to request for advice in order to make sure that if you feel the obligation to do so, you can connect with law enforcement. Maybe that's something on your side, Cornelius, which you can answer and give advice.
Yeah, no, I think you can always submit the information to stopfraud@arccorp.com, and if that data then gets into our system, and let's say it is John Joe who's committing the fraud, and we have data on them, which then could lead to an investigation. Doug and his team will, lead an investigation into an individual if it gets to that level, and then through our contacts at various law enforcement agencies, the case will be submitted to them, and then that could potentially come to a arrest or whatever downstream. And of course, Doug and his team have had previous successes in bringing fraudsters to serve time, and so that's an alternative way. But again, it is also very difficult to confirm that it's a real person. There's a lot of synthetic IDs out there. The emails being used is recyclable. The phone numbers are recyclable. The names are recyclable. It might not necessarily be John Joe that's behind that being a real person. So it just depends on all of the data points as well. But back to the question, there's no obligation to use an agency to report this to anyone unless it becomes a bigger issue, unless you've been hacked or you've been a victim of phishing fraud or phishing emails or anything like that. You didn't need to report those to the cybercrime units in your area. You can report it to the FBI, you can report it to local police. But as far as reporting someone or a consumer or customer that you put in the risk check system for validation, there's no need to report those out. But if you've been a victim of other angles or other types of fraud, please do report those to law enforcement. Doug, do you want to add anything there?
Just that, yeah, we highly encourage the agency community to report in fraud attempts. The team does look at them. We will use the data points, the passenger name, a credit card, things like that, to search the system to see if any other agencies have recently been impacted by them or targeted by them, and then we will call the next agent down the line, or send them a fraud alert to say, hey, these are highly suspect transactions. You need to let us know, who the customer is, how did they come in, what's their contact information. And we have saved agents from a lot of financial grief by being able to warn the next agent down the line. So, and the agents are always very happy to hear from us.
Thanks. That's basically not only the way how you should work via systems, but actually having experts, people looking after the travel agents and having direct connections with them. A good example of how that would work and how that can actually impact or proactively make sure that you will not suffer of fraud costs. So that's basically always a combination that works best. That's also what we have learned in the past. thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and
So
just to
basically,
take that,
yeah,
just to
go
take it a
ahead.
little bit further, I
Yeah.
just want to add. So if agency A realizes there's not a fraud, and they didn't issue any tickets, but they send in the fraud information, we find the fraudster at agency B. They did issue tickets. That information will then make its way into the Perseus database. So maybe not from incident A or agency A, but it's going to come in from the second incident or incident B when ARC uploads that fraud data into the Perseus environment. So it's going to make its way there.
Yeah, indeed, and in the end, and that's why I already went to the next slide. Is well, having both a team that helps you make you feel more comfortable to check and be in direct contact with you as a travel agent, as well having the tools such as the ARC Risk Check being part of your toolkit. Basically, those are the largest benefits you will have as a travel agent. It will not only help you to grow your business because you can process more good transactions, because we find in our database that they're genuine, they're not associated to fraud, however, being checked against our database for many times. The other reason could be, the other goal could be to save money, so you will have less chargebacks, less false positives, and finally, it will give you maybe even because you are working at a travel agent, you're owning a travel agent, but fraud, credit card fraud is maybe not your field of expertise. You do not know how to handle certain transactions. Basically, the tool will give you some more confidence while reviewing and accepting incoming bookings. And again, if you would like to understand if it actually will bring you more confidence in your daily operations, then we invite you obviously to try the tool for a month, basically, and try it out. So what we usually see is we know your customers. Based on our data, at least 80% of the transactions you check we've seen before. So usually the information that we can provide back to you is always relevant in order to make a more data-driven decision rather than making emotional decisions or decisions that are not based on any data at all. So again, next steps, I can do it, but maybe Cornelius, for you, next steps, how does it work? I should touch on it earlier and a little bit more about the 1 month free trial and how people could proceed when they're interested in trying out the service.
Yeah, as mentioned, just go to arccorp.com, go under support, and you'll see ARC Risk Check as under the fraud section. You can click on that link, and it'll take you through to a point where you can register for the tool, and it all goes sort of automated from there back to Perseus and to our internal. As mentioned as well, we will be sending out a link to that if you can't find it. As I've just described, we will, for all the participants on this webinar, we will send you a link as well to both the ARC Risk Check, but also the API option is embedded there as well. So you can there's another link out to get more information on the API section as well. Yeah, and then yeah, I have another question here. Voter, as to how often is the info uploaded to Perseus? So how often, I mean, from ARC side, our data gets loaded weekly. We've made attempts to do it more frequently, but it's not feasible at this moment in time. But ARC data gets loaded weekly, so it's relatively fresh information there from the ARC side. From other participants in Perseus globally, Voter, how frequently would you say data gets loaded?
So as explained in one of the earlier slides, there are around 10,000 plus data fields added into our database on a weekly basis. So on a daily basis, we do receive information, but on a weekly basis, we receive obviously significant information. So new information will be added on a daily basis into our platform, which we process overnight and is available and incorporate it in our database, in our artificial intelligence. So the information in our database is accurate and up to date, allowing you to make those data-driven decisions, also with updated information.
Perfect, perfect, thank you. We still have a few minutes left if anybody wants to pose another question, or if Doug, Wouter, you want to add any additional comment?
No, I think I've. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can just say, you know, doing the fraud investigations at ARC and using all the fraud that occurs in our world, it's amazing to see when I go into the Perseus tool and start looking at email addresses, passenger names, and the itineraries of, you know, these fraudsters. Some of them do just attack or attempt to attack airlines directly. Some do agencies direct, you know, just solely, and others bounce around between the two entities. And you know, this is one of the ways that you can keep track of what is going on, who else is being impacted, because I then find information and I reach out to the airline that uploaded the data and I get them to add in their losses to our losses, and I can increase the financial impact, and that drives law enforcement to take these types of cases more seriously, which is great.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I don't see any additional questions coming in. I think we can conclude this webinar. I want to thank you, Wouter, for participating with us. I want to thank our audience for signing up and joining us here today. I hope it was informative for you. You know, do take advantage of the free trial. There's no obligation at the end of it. See if the tool brings value to your environment. You know, it's ultimately created for the agency community and the smaller airline communities, you know, to help prevent fraud. I mean, we can't do it all on our side, you know, so everybody needs to do their bit to help prevent fraud in the system, and you know, help reduce losses to yourselves, and you know, and reduce cost, etc. And just be comfortable in making those decisions. But yeah, again, thank you very much for everyone participating, and of course, Wouter joining us from the Netherlands at a very late hour for you to talk through this with us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.